In the heart of the city stood a mansion so vast that people slowed their cars just to stare at it. High iron gates crowned with gold designs guarded the entrance, while security men stood alert day and night. This was the home of Danladi Kingsley, a man whose name alone could open doors or close them forever. Danladi Kingsley was not just rich. He was power itself. Banks bowed to him. Politicians smiled nervously around him. Businessmen trembled when his calls came in late at night. His wealth had been built on ruthless ambition, endless deals, and an unshakable belief that money made a man superior to everyone else. Compassion was weakness. Mercy was for the poor. Inside his mansion, luxury screamed from every corner. Marble floors that reflected crystal chandeliers, walls decorated with rare art, rooms larger than most people's houses. Yet beneath the shine there was no warmth, no laughter, no love, only control. Danladi ruled his household the same way he ruled his empire, through fear, authority, and silence. Servants moved quickly, heads bowed, footsteps soft. A single mistake could cost them their job, sometimes more. And in this house of power lived his only child, Vanessa Kingsley. From the day she was born, Vanessa had never known the word no. Every cry was answered with gifts. Every desire became reality. While other children learned humility, Vanessa learned entitlement. She watched her father dismiss people with a wave of his hand, crush enemies without remorse, and she absorbed those lessons deeply. She learned that money meant importance, that wealth meant worth, that those without it were nothing. Danladi adored his daughter in his own cold way. He didn't teach her kindness or empathy. He taught her dominance. "Never bow to anyone," he once told her. "The world respects power, not softness." Vanessa listened. By the time she was a teenager, arrogance sat on her shoulders like a crown. She walked through the mansion as if everyone beneath the roof existed solely for her convenience. Servants were not people to her, they were tools. Replaceable, invisible. She watched them scrub floors, wash dishes, carry heavy loads, and she felt nothing. Sometimes she felt amusement, other times disgust. "This is why they are poor," she would say casually. "They deserve it." Her laughter often echoed through the halls, not the laughter of joy, but of superiority. Danladi saw this behavior and did nothing to correct it. In fact, he encouraged it. To him, his daughter was strong, untouchable, a true Kingsley. But in that same house of wealth and arrogance, fate was quietly setting the stage for a story no amount of money could rewrite. Because power built on cruelty never lasts forever, and every throne made of pride eventually crumbles. Unbeknownst to Danladi Kingsley and his spoiled daughter, the very people they looked down upon, the silent ones, the suffering ones, would one day stand above them. And at the center of that coming storm was a quiet maid, whose tears would soon shake the walls of the mighty Kingsley mansion. This was the beginning. Vanessa Kingsley, a black ebony beautiful African lady from Lagos State, did not become cruel overnight. Her arrogance was carefully shaped, polished, and fed every single day by the world she grew up in. From childhood, she was surrounded by luxury so excessive that hardship seemed like a fairy tale meant for other people. Pain was something she watched from afar, never something she was meant to feel. Her mornings began in silk sheets and air-conditioned comfort. Breakfast was prepared by servants who dared not meet her eyes. Every request, no matter how small, was met instantly. If her tea was too warm, someone was scolded. If her shoes were not polished to perfection, someone paid the price. And Vanessa noticed everything. She noticed how servants flinched when she entered a room. She noticed how her father's voice alone could silence adults twice his age. She noticed how money erased consequences. Instead of empathy, these observations bred contempt. To Vanessa, suffering was proof of weakness. Anyone struggling simply hadn't tried hard enough, or wasn't important enough to matter. By her teenage years, her words had grown sharper than knives. "Why are you so slow?" She would snap at a maid scrubbing the stairs. "Can't you do anything right?" She would hiss at a driver adjusting her seat. The servants learned to endure. Apologies fell easily from their lips, even when they had done nothing wrong. Silence became their defense. Vanessa enjoyed this power. She loved watching grown adults lower their heads before her. It made her feel important. Untouchable, alive. Sometimes she would deliberately create problems just to see reactions. She would scatter clothes across the room after they had been neatly arranged. She would ring the bell repeatedly, just to complain about something trivial. When servants cried, she felt no guilt. "Stop crying," she would say coldly. "Tears don't suit people like you." Her father watched all this with quiet approval. In his eyes, Vanessa was simply strong, just like him. "Don't let anyone walk over you," Danladi told her once. "The world is cruel, be crueler." Those words settled deep in her heart. By the time she became a young woman, Vanessa had perfected the art of humiliation. She knew exactly how to hurt without lifting a finger, through words, through silence, through deliberate neglect. She understood that hunger broke people faster than punishment. That shame cut deeper than pain. She spoke to servants as if they were beneath the air she breathed. "You people are lucky to even be here," she once said casually. "Without my father, you would be nothing." Her laughter echoed through the mansion, leaving humiliation behind like a trail. No one challenged her. No one dared. And so Vanessa Kingsley grew into a woman who believed she was above consequences, above compassion, above humanity itself. She had never been denied, never been corrected, never been held accountable. She believed wealth made her invincible. She believed power was permanent. She believed servants were born to serve and suffer. She did not know that life was quietly preparing a lesson for her. A lesson written in tears, hunger, and humiliation. A lesson that would one day place her on her knees before the very people she once crushed without remorse. But for now, Vanessa reigned supreme, cold, arrogant, and untouched. While somewhere beyond the gates of the mansion, fate waited patiently for its turn. Zainab's tears did not come loudly. Just like the cold wind in northern Nigeria, they came quietly, carefully, like everything else she did in the Kingsley mansion. From the outside, she appeared obedient and composed, but inside her, something fragile was slowly breaking. The first time she cried because of Vanessa was barely a week after she arrived. It was early morning. The house was still wrapped in silence as Zainab cleaned the dining area, her movements slow but precise. She had spent extra time polishing the table, determined not to give anyone a reason to complain. Her stomach growled softly, but she ignored it. Hunger was familiar, humiliation was harder. Vanessa entered the room, phone pressed to her ear, laughter on her lips. Without even looking properly, she stopped mid-step. "Who cleaned this?" she asked sharply. "I did, ma'am," Zainab replied, stepping forward nervously. Vanessa hung up the phone and examined the table with exaggerated seriousness. Then, without warning, she swept her arm across it. Plates, cutlery, and glasses crashed to the floor, shattering loudly against the marble. "Clean it again," she said coldly. Zainab froze. "But ma'am, I just finished—" Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Did I ask you to talk?" Zainab dropped to her knees immediately, her hands shaking as she gathered the broken pieces. A shard of glass cut into her finger, blood seeping out, but she did not cry out. She simply pressed her lips together, blinking rapidly as tears filled her eyes. Vanessa watched her bleed. "Careful," she said mockingly. "If you stain the floor, you'll clean it again." That night, Zainab cried for the first time in the servants' quarters. She covered her mouth with her hand to muffle the sound, afraid someone might hear. Her tears fell freely, tears of confusion, pain, and disbelief. "What did I do wrong?" she whispered to herself. The days that followed were worse. Vanessa's scolding became routine. If Zainab was early, she was accused of rushing. If she was late, she was punished for laziness. Vanessa's words were sharp and deliberate, designed to cut deep. "Can't you see properly? Are you this stupid naturally, or did someone teach you? Why are you always shaking? Are you afraid of me?" Each insult sank into Zainab's heart, leaving scars no one could see. Sometimes Vanessa scolded her in front of other servants. Other times in front of visitors. "Is this the kind of help you people bring these days?" Vanessa would ask loudly, laughing as others watched Zainab shrink with shame. Zainab's tears became a nightly routine. She cried for her mother, for the home she had left behind, for the dignity she was slowly losing. She cried because she was tired, because she was hungry, because she felt invisible. Yet every morning she wiped her eyes and returned to work. One afternoon, after hours of scrubbing the kitchen floor, Zainab collapsed briefly against the wall. Her legs could no longer hold her. Vanessa walked in at that exact moment. "Resting?" she snapped. "So this is why nothing ever gets done." Zainab tried to explain. Before she could finish, Vanessa slapped the bucket from her hand, spilling dirty water across the floor. "Clean it again," she said. "And if I see you sitting one more time, you'll regret it." Zainab obeyed, tears dropping into the water as she scrubbed. The other servants began to notice the change in her. Her eyes were always red. Her smile had faded. Her shoulders drooped under invisible weight. But no one dared intervene. Vanessa was untouchable. In her quiet moments, Zainab prayed. "God, please don't let my heart harden," she whispered. "Please don't let me become like them." Her tears watered the seed of endurance inside her, even as cruelty tried to choke it. These were the first tears, but they would not be the last. Because once cruelty tastes obedience, it always demands more. By the time hunger had settled permanently into Zainab's body, pain followed closely behind. Her strength was draining, but the work only increased. Vanessa seemed to take special pleasure in assigning her the hardest tasks, the ones that broke the body slowly, silently. Every morning, before the sun rose, Zainab's hands were already at work. She scrubbed marble floors until her knees burned and her fingers felt raw. She washed clothes by hand for hours, twisting heavy fabrics until her wrists screamed. She lifted buckets of water that felt heavier each day, her arms trembling as she dragged them across the compound. At first, they were just small cuts, thin lines across her palms and fingers. She wrapped them with old cloth at night, praying they would heal by morning. But there was no rest, no healing. Soap entered the wounds daily, water stung like fire. Blood mixed with detergent and disappeared down the drain. One afternoon, while washing clothes, her grip failed her. A bowl slipped and shattered loudly. Vanessa appeared instantly. "What did you break?" she snapped. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Zainab said, her voice shaking. My hand slipped. Vanessa grabbed her wrist roughly and looked at her palms, now swollen and bleeding. "So you're dirty and weak," she sneered. Zainab froze. "Ma'am, please, did you suddenly grow a mouth?" Vanessa barked. Zainab knelt and began picking up the shards. Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. "Don't stain my floor." That night, Zainab could not close her hands. She cried quietly, pressing them to her chest, feeling her heartbeat throb through the pain. Her stomach was empty, her body was exhausted. "God, please give me strength for tomorrow." Tomorrow came mercilessly. Vanessa sent her to scrub the outside tiles under the sun. The heat was unforgiving. Sweat ran into her eyes, mixing with tears she refused to shed openly. Her hands slipped constantly, the wounds reopening again and again. "Do you think I have all day?" Zainab's vision blurred. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself upright. She remembered her father's weak voice back home, depending on her. She remembered hunger. She remembered why she could not stop. "She won't last," one said softly. "She's already broken," another replied. But Zainab kept moving. One evening, as she prepared food for the household, blood from her cracked fingers dripped into the sink. She washed it away quickly, terrified Vanessa would notice. But Vanessa noticed everything. "Are you trying to poison us?" "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Sorry doesn't fix ugliness," Vanessa replied. "Finish cooking, and don't touch my plates again." That night, Zainab was denied food. Her body began to fail her. Fever came and went. Her back ached constantly. Every breath felt heavier than the last. Yet something strange happened amid the suffering. With every cut, every ache, every tear swallowed, Zainab's spirit hardened, not into bitterness, but into endurance. She learned how to survive pain without letting it destroy her heart. She learned how to work through agony without losing her humanity. Vanessa believed she was breaking her. She did not realize she was training her. Because hands that bleed from honest labor remember pain, and one day they also remember strength. And Zainab's hands, though wounded and trembling, were learning a lesson Vanessa could never understand. that dignity is forged in suffering, and those who endure quietly often rise the highest when fate finally turns. Night was the only time the young Hausa lady Zainab truly existed. When the mansion finally fell silent, when Vanessa retreated to her luxurious room, when laughter faded, when footsteps disappeared, Zainab was left alone with her pain. The servants' quarters were small, dim, and airless, but to Zainab they were a refuge. It was the only place where she could breathe without fear of being shouted at. She lay on her thin mattress, her body aching in places she didn't know could hurt. Her hands throbbed from the day's work, wrapped loosely in torn cloth. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like a living thing, sharp and unforgiving. Sometimes it hurt so much she curled into herself, pressing her knees to her chest, as if she could silence it. Not boldly, she prayed in whispers, broken sentences, and tears. "God, please, I'm tired." Her voice trembled in the darkness. Happiness felt too far away, too unreal. She prayed simply to survive the next day. Some nights she cried so quietly that even the walls could barely hear her. Other nights, tears streamed freely down her face, soaking the mattress beneath her. She cried for her mother, whose warmth she barely remembered. She cried for her father, who believed she was doing well in the city. She cried for herself, for the girl she used to be before cruelty hardened her days. "Why am I here?" she whispered one night, staring at the ceiling. "What did I do to deserve this?" There was no answer. Only silence. Her body weakened more each day. Hunger made her dizzy. Pain made her restless. Sleep came in short, painful fragments. Sometimes she dreamed of food, simple food. A bowl of rice, a piece of bread. She would wake up with tears in her eyes, clutching her empty stomach. Faith was the only thing Vanessa could not take from her. Zainab remembered the words her mother used to say, "When people refuse to see you, God never looks away." She clung to those words like a lifeline. On especially cruel days, when Vanessa's insults cut deeper than usual, Zainab prayed longer at night. "God, don't let my heart become bitter," she sobbed. It would have been easier to hate, easier to harden, easier to let anger replace pain. But Zainab feared losing herself more than she feared suffering. She saw how cruelty had shaped Vanessa, how power had emptied her of compassion. Zainab did not want that fate. Sometimes, other servants heard her praying softly and paused outside her door. No one interrupted. No one mocked her. One night, exhausted beyond words, Zainab fell to her knees beside her mattress. Her body shook as she pressed her bleeding hands together. "God," she whispered, barely breathing, "if this is my life forever, give me the strength to endure it. But if there is more for me, please don't forget me." That night, something inside her settled. Not relief, not joy, but resolve. Her prayers did not stop the pain. They did not soften Vanessa's heart. They did not fill her stomach. Each whispered prayer stitched her broken spirit back together, piece by fragile piece. Each tear watered a strength that was invisible but growing. Vanessa believed Zainab was weak because she cried at night. She was wrong. Those nights of prayer were not moments of defeat. They were moments of survival. And somewhere beyond the mansion walls, fate was listening carefully, counting every tear, every whispered plea. Every night, Zainab chose faith over despair, because when the world finally turned, it would turn loudly. And the quiet maid who prayed in darkness would one day stand in the light, unbroken. Vanessa's cruelty had become predictable. An African girl who most likely can't breathe without showing her hatred for Zainab, almost ritualistic. She ruled the mansion with a sharp tongue and a cold smile, enjoying every second of the fear and obedience that followed her. She believed that wealth made her untouchable, that power could bend the will of anyone who dared to stand under her shadow. And in the house of her father, she was practically sovereign. Zainab, frail and silent, had become the center of Vanessa's amusement. The girl's every movement, every blink, every misstep was scrutinized with cruel delight. Vanessa learned quickly what worked and what caused fear, and she wielded her power like an artist with a brush, painting humiliation across Zainab's every day. One afternoon, the mansion was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Zainab was kneeling, scrubbing the floor in the sunlit hall, when Vanessa entered, heels clicking sharply on the polished marble. She paused at the doorway, observing the maid bending over her work. Her lips curved into a malicious smile. "Is this your idea of work?" Vanessa sneered, stepping closer. "You are slower than a snail crawling in mud. How do you expect to survive in the world if you can't even handle a clean floor?" Zainab's hands trembled, muscles aching, her back screaming in protest. But she said nothing. She had learned the hard way that protest only invited more punishment. Vanessa circled her slowly, like a predator savoring the fear of its prey. "And look at those hands," she said mockingly, pointing at Zainab's cracked, bleeding palms. "Are you trying to decorate the floor with your own blood? How dramatic!" She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed through the empty hall. It was the kind of laughter that pierced the chest, made Zainab's stomach knot with shame, and left her trembling as she continued scrubbing. "Do you even eat properly?" Vanessa asked suddenly, tilting her head. "No wonder you're so weak. You should be thankful I don't starve you completely." The words cut deeper than hunger itself. Zainab's lips pressed together, holding back the sobs she had learned to swallow daily. Her vision blurred, but she continued her work, forcing herself not to collapse under the weight of the humiliation. Vanessa's cruelty was not limited to work. She would parade Zainab in front of guests during lunch or dinner, pointing out any small mistake, exaggerating it, and laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. "Did you see this?" Vanessa said one day to a visiting friend. "The new maid can't even carry a tray without shaking." Can you imagine the mess she would make if she cooked? The visitors chuckled nervously, looking away, unsure of how to respond. Zainab's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept her eyes cast down. She had learned that defiance only worsened the punishment. Even her small moments of relief were stolen. If she dared to wipe a tear from her face, Vanessa noticed. "Why are you crying?" Vanessa demanded one evening, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Are you pretending to be weak, pathetic?" Zainab nodded silently, continuing her chores. Vanessa reveled in the power she held over the girl, the way fear could twist a person's spine, the way obedience could hollow out the human spirit. Each time Zainab flinched, she felt victorious. Each time the maid wiped her tears silently, she laughed harder. One night, Vanessa held a small party for her friends. They gathered in the living room, drinking wine and exchanging stories of wealth and influence. Meanwhile, Zainab served them in silence, balancing trays with trembling hands, occasionally spilling a drop of wine or a crumb of food. Vanessa noticed each mistake, of course. "Watch your step," she hissed sharply. "Are you trying to ruin my shoes, or is that your plan?" The African guests laughed awkwardly, unsure whether to feel pity or amusement. Zainab's stomach was empty. Her hands were raw and bleeding from the day's labor. But she moved, quiet and precise, as Vanessa's laughter rang in her ears. As the night grew late, Zainab carried the last tray to the kitchen. Her legs were stiff, her back ached, and her stomach roared in protest. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling sharply, just to remind herself that she was still alive. Meanwhile, Vanessa lounged on the couch, sipping wine, completely unaware that every cruel word, every scolding, every laugh was shaping a fire inside Zainab. A fire Vanessa could never see, but one that would one day illuminate the darkness she had cast over the maid's life. Vanessa believed that she had all the power. She believed that Zainab's suffering was permanent. But Zainab's endurance, her silent prayers, her willingness to survive against cruelty, were slowly forging strength into her bones. And one day, Vanessa would learn that the person she had tormented was not meant to remain under her heel forever, because power built on laughter and cruelty always carries the seeds of its own downfall. And Zainab, the quiet maid, was already planting them. The Kingsley African mansion was accustomed to visitors. Business associates, friends of Vanessa, and distant relatives walked through its grand halls without a second thought. They were met with luxury, perfection, and the cold smile of wealth. But none of them noticed Zainab, not really. Not until the day Mr. Ibrahim Kareem arrived. He was not like the others. He did not immediately bow to the shine of marble floors or the glint of chandeliers. His gaze moved slowly, thoughtfully, and when it landed on people, it lingered in a way that made them feel seen. Zainab was scrubbing the floor near the main entrance, exhausted from hours of labor, her hands raw and bleeding. Her back ached, her stomach twisted in pain from hunger. Sweat ran down her face, and tears, silent and unbidden, streaked her cheeks. Vanessa was busy greeting Mr. Kareem, laughing brightly, her elegance a shield that made her cruelty almost invisible. She introduced Zainab casually. "Zainab," she said, almost dismissively, "this is Ibrahim Kareem." Mr. Kareem's eyes flicked to Zainab. He noticed the way she flinched when Vanessa spoke. He noticed her trembling hands, the dark circles under her eyes, and the quiet dignity she struggled to maintain. Most people would have ignored her completely, seeing only a servant. But he did not. "Hello," he said kindly. Zainab's voice came out soft and barely audible. "Good afternoon, sir." There was a pause. Even when spoken to, she's timid. That's the kind of help you get in this house. Instead, he knelt slightly, bringing his eyes level with Zainab's. "You don't need to be afraid," he said gently. "I can see you. I see how hard you're working." Zainab's lips trembled. No one had ever said that to her. Not her father, not the other servants, not even her cruel employer. I just try my best," she whispered. "Your best is extraordinary," Mr. Kareem replied. "Extraordinary people are often invisible to those who think they are powerful." "But I see you." Vanessa noticed the exchange and scowled. How dare someone else acknowledge Zainab? She stepped closer, placing a hand on her hip. "I hope you're not imagining she deserves praise," Vanessa said sharply. "She's just a maid." "I don't see her as just a maid," Mr. Kareem said calmly. "I see a person who has endured more than most, and yet remains humble, patient, and dignified." "That is rare." Vanessa's face flushed with anger. She had never been challenged like this before, not openly, not calmly, not in front of witnesses. Her laughter, which usually cut through Zainab like a knife, caught in her throat. Zainab, meanwhile, stood frozen. Her heart pounded, a strange warmth spreading through her chest, a mix of fear, disbelief, and hope. For the first time in months, someone had recognized her struggle without judgment, without mockery. That night, after the guest had left, Zainab knelt by her thin mattress and prayed longer than she ever had before. "God," she whispered, "please, if there is a way out, let me find it." Little did she know Mr. Kareem had already made a decision. He had seen her strength, her endurance, and her suffering. The very next week he returned. This time he offered Zainab something she had never dreamed of, an opportunity. "Zainab," he said softly but with authority, "I want to help you. I see your worth. I see your potential. If you are willing, I will place you in a position where no one can ever treat you as you've been treated here." Zainab's hands shook. She looked around the mansion, at the silent servants, at the cruel daughter, and at the walls that had confined her for months. She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," she whispered. I am willing." That moment was quiet, but it was seismic. It was the turning point that would later shake Vanessa's world to its core. The cruel billionaire's daughter believed she had power over everyone. She had not counted on someone finally noticing Zainab, not as a servant, not as a timid girl, but as a person worthy of respect, of care, of opportunity. And in that moment, the invisible chains around Zainab began to shatter, piece by piece, as hope quietly stepped in where cruelty had long ruled. The seeds of justice, of reversal, and of a fate much larger than wealth had been planted. Vanessa laughed that night, unaware that her reign of dominance had a ticking clock. Zainab, the quiet maid, had been seen, and being seen was the first step toward power. The next week was unlike any Zainab had ever experienced. Mr. Ibrahim Kareem returned to the mansion, but this time he did not merely observe. The sun blazed through the Lagos, Nigeria mansion windows, making the marble floors glimmer like glass. Zainab was in the kitchen, hands raw and bleeding from hours of scrubbing, her back bent until it ached. Vanessa stormed in, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was already furious because Zainab had taken a few extra minutes to finish the day's laundry. "Finally!" Vanessa exclaimed dramatically. "I was beginning to think you were completely useless." Zainab flinched, as she always did. Her hands trembled, her stomach twisted from hunger, but she lowered her head and said nothing. She knew that speaking up only worsened her suffering. Vanessa circled her like a predator, eyes sharp and cruel. "Do you even have a brain in that head, or is it empty like the rest of you people?" At that precise moment, Mr. Kareem entered the kitchen. He had been touring the mansion, but had paused when he heard Vanessa's voice rising. He had seen Zainab working tirelessly for months and could not ignore the spectacle. "Enough!" he said, his voice calm but commanding. Vanessa froze, startled. She had never been spoken to like this before, especially not in the presence of servants. Mr. Kareem's gaze shifted to Zainab, and he noticed the tremor in her hands, the exhaustion in her posture, the tears she had not shed openly but were clear in her eyes. "You," he said, his eyes steady on Vanessa, "what do you think you are doing?" Vanessa blinked, momentarily unsure of how to respond. She is a maid, sir. She should..." "Should what?" Mr. Kareem interrupted. "Be humiliated? Be scolded until she can no longer stand?" She had never been confronted with such authority or morality before. "Are you okay?" Zainab's lips quivered. She wanted to say yes, to appear strong, but her voice failed her. She could only nod. "I see you," he said gently. "I have seen your hands, your effort, your endurance, and I see the cruelty you have endured. It stops now." Vanessa's face contorted with fury. She stepped closer to Mr. Kareem, attempting to regain control. "Sir, You will not speak over me," he said sharply. "You will not humiliate her in my presence. And if you raise your voice again, I promise you consequences." For the first time, Vanessa was silenced. The power she had wielded so effortlessly over Zainab vanished in an instant. She realized that wealth alone did not grant her authority in this room. Turning back to Zainab, Mr. Kareem's voice softened. "You deserve better. You deserve respect, nourishment, rest, and dignity. And I am going to make sure you get it." Tears rolled freely down Zainab's cheeks. She pressed her lips together to keep from sobbing out loud, her body trembling from months of exhaustion, pain, and starvation. For the first time, someone recognized her suffering. For the first time, she was seen. Vanessa seethed, but Mr. Kareem ignored her. "Zainab," he said, "I want to offer you a chance, an opportunity. If you are willing, I will take you out of this place, give you education, care, and a life you never imagined possible. You will not be a servant. You will be respected. You will be free." A life without cruelty? She had only dreamed of surviving. "Yes," she whispered, tears falling down her cheeks. "Yes, sir, I am willing." Mr. Kareem nodded. "But first, understand this. You are not weak for suffering. One day, your strength will repay every injustice you have faced." Vanessa, watching from the side, could not hide the shock in her eyes. She realized that her cruelty had been powerless against someone who truly saw Zainab's worth. From that day forward, Zainab's life began to change. She was still bound by the constraints of the mansion for a few days, but she carried with her a new hope, a quiet flame of possibility that no abuse could extinguish. She returned to her chores that afternoon, but her steps felt lighter, her heart calmer. Vanessa continued to sneer occasionally, but Zainab no longer flinched. She had been recognized, defended, and given a chance. And she knew one thing clearly: her suffering had not been in vain. It had prepared her for the life she was about to reclaim, a life of dignity, respect, and eventually triumph. That afternoon, the mansion seemed different. The air of cruelty that Vanessa had ruled with so confidently no longer held the same weight. Somewhere deep inside, a shift had begun. Zainab had been seen, and that sight alone was powerful enough to start rewriting her destiny. Zainab's life outside the Kingsley Lagos, Nigeria mansion began slowly, carefully, like a fragile flower pushing through cracked concrete. She stepped into the world with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and hope, a strange cocktail she had not felt in years. The weight of abuse, hunger, and humiliation had left her body bent and her hands scarred. But her spirit, tempered by months of endurance, was unbroken. Mr. Ibrahim Kareem took her under his wing immediately. He arranged for her to stay in a comfortable home, far away from the opulent cruelty she had endured. For the first time in her life, she was given a room of her own. Soft sheets, a warm bed, and a small window that let in sunlight made her feel almost dizzy with relief. She could move freely, without fear of punishment. She could breathe. She could eat without worry. The first meal she had was simple: rice, stew, and bread. Zainab's hands trembled as she held the plate. She closed her eyes and took a bite, the flavors exploding like a miracle in her mouth. No one laughed at her weakness. No one watched her like she was prey. She cried quietly, tears falling freely, not of pain but of release. Mr. Kareem sat across from her, calm and reassuring. "You've endured so much," he said softly. "And yet here you are, stronger than most. That strength will carry you far." The weight of all those months of suffering pressed on her chest, but for the first time she felt it lift. In the days that followed, Mr. Kareem arranged for Zainab to enroll in classes. Education had been a distant dream during her years of labor, something she had long believed impossible. Now, she studied diligently, filling her mind with knowledge she had never been allowed to pursue. Reading, writing, and learning became a new form of freedom. Every lesson was a step further away from the life she had endured, and every success, no matter how small, became a triumph over the cruelty that had sought to break her. Yet Zainab never forgot her past. She remembered Vanessa's laughter, her cruel words, the nights of prayer, the hunger, and the raw, bleeding hands. Those memories were painful, but they were also fuel. They reminded her of how far she had come, of the resilience she carried, and of the dignity she had fought to preserve. Slowly, she began to discover the joy of normal life. She walked without fear, laughed without guilt, and spoke without hesitation. She met kind people, made friends, and experienced small acts of generosity that she had never known. She learned that the world could be beautiful, that not everyone desired to see her suffer, and that sometimes love and kindness were more powerful than wealth and power. Vanessa, in contrast, remained trapped in her own world of arrogance. The mansion that had once amplified her power now amplified her entitlement. She continued to flaunt her wealth, surround herself with people who feared her, and treat servants with disdain. But she could feel the shift happening. She had lost her grip on Zainab, the girl she had tormented. The quiet maid once at her mercy was now beyond her reach. Zainab's first days of freedom were bittersweet. She grieved the years stolen from her, the opportunities denied, and the pain endured. But with each day, those tears became less about sorrow and more about liberation. Each step she took, each lesson she learned, each kind word she received, was a reminder that she had survived, and that survival could be transformed into triumph. One evening, as she sat by her window, watching the sun set in shades of orange and pink, Zainab whispered a prayer. Not for endurance this time, but for gratitude. "Thank you, God," she said softly. "Thank you for keeping me alive. Thank you for giving me hope, and for showing me that even after the darkest nights, there is light." It was the first time she truly believed it. The road ahead was still long. Education, healing, and life beyond cruelty would take time. But Zainab had learned something far more important than knowledge or skill. She had learned her own worth. And that worth was something Vanessa, and anyone else who had tried to break her, could never take away. Life in the Lagos Kingsley mansion had always seemed untouchable, like a fortress built on wealth, power, and fear, just like a normal Lagos billionaire house. But cracks were forming, small, almost invisible at first, yet growing with each passing day. Vanessa, the once arrogant daughter, was beginning to sense it, though she refused to admit it even to herself. Ever since Zainab had left, there was a void in the household that no amount of servants, gold, or extravagance could fill. Tasks that Zainab had managed flawlessly began to pile up, The floors lost their shine, the laundry became uneven, and meals occasionally arrived late. The other maids worked diligently, but none carried the quiet strength, the endurance, and the precision that Zainab had brought. Vanessa noticed, but instead of learning humility, her arrogance twisted into impatience and rage. She began shouting more often, throwing tantrums over minor mistakes, and punishing anyone she could reach. One evening, during a high-profile dinner with business associates, the cracks became undeniable. Vanessa had insisted on serving the meal herself, demonstrating her control over the household. Plates were dropped, drinks spilled, servants stumbled under pressure. Her father, Danladi Kingsley, fumed quietly, his patience thinning. "Vanessa," he said sharply, "what is going on? This is unacceptable." "I'm doing my best, father," she snapped, though her voice trembled slightly. She hated that she trembled. She hated that she could feel the mansion slipping beneath her like sand. Danladi's eyes were hard. "Your best isn't enough," he said. "Control the house, or lose control over everything." Meanwhile, Vanessa's friends whispered behind her back, noticing her sudden anxiety, her tight smile, her growing frustration. Whispers turned into gossip. Gossip turned into rumors. Slowly, the mansion's aura of perfection began to unravel. It wasn't just the household. The empire outside the walls was feeling the effects. Danladi Kingsley's ruthless methods, once so effective, had made him enemies. Investors began to question his decisions. Contracts were delayed. His reputation, built on dominance and intimidation, was beginning to crack. Vanessa felt the tension keenly. The power she had taken for granted, power over servants, over her father, over the mansion, was weakening. And the girl she had tormented, Zainab, had been the catalyst for change. Word of Zainab's success began to reach the city. People who had seen her resilience whispered about the girl who had survived Vanessa's cruelty and found her own path to freedom. Slowly, the story reached the ears of those within the Kingsley circle. Vanessa seethed as she heard it. The maid, the powerless girl, now educated, respected, and sought after. She could not comprehend how someone she had mocked, starved, and abused could now surpass her in dignity and influence. She began making mistakes, simple ones at first, like mismanaging schedules, forgetting appointments, or misplacing items. But the mistakes compounded, her confidence faltered. The fear she once inspired faded. Her father, growing older and wearier, began to question her capability as heir to his empire. "Vanessa," he said one evening, frustration clear in his voice, "you cannot run this house or our business with temper and arrogance alone. You must learn discipline. You must learn responsibility." Vanessa's chest tightened. She hated to hear criticism. She hated the recognition that she had failed in ways Zainab never had. She stormed out of the room, her pride bruised, her arrogance beginning to crack. Outside, Zainab's life blossomed. She studied during the day, learned new skills, and began working on projects with Mr. Kareem, who saw her potential and nurtured it. Each day she flourished, gaining confidence, building connections, and experiencing a life Vanessa could never imagine. Zainab's life had transformed, but the journey was far from over. Each day, she woke with a determination that had been forged in months of pain, hunger, and humiliation. She no longer bowed under cruelty. Instead, she stood tall, each scar on her hands a testament to survival and endurance. Mr. Ibrahim Kareem continued to guide her, introducing her to mentors, tutors, and business opportunities she had never imagined. He believed in nurturing her potential, understanding that the quiet maid he had once seen trembling beneath Vanessa's wrath possessed an intelligence and resilience that wealth and privilege could not teach. Zainab embraced every chance to learn. Early mornings were spent poring over books, afternoons attending lessons in finance, etiquette, and leadership, and evenings working on projects under Mr. Kareem's careful supervision. She absorbed knowledge quickly, her mind hungry in a way her body had once been. Every new skill, every new piece of knowledge felt like freedom incarnate. The city was a new world. Zainab walked through streets alive with possibility, her eyes bright with curiosity. She visited offices, attended social gatherings, and even began mentoring other young women who reminded her of herself. Girls from humble backgrounds, struggling to survive in a world that often ignored them. Word of her transformation began to spread quietly at first. People whispered about the girl who had endured cruelty, yet remained dignified. She was no longer a maid, no longer invisible, no longer silenced. She had become someone whose presence demanded respect. Vanessa, back in the mansion, was starting to crumble under the weight of her own arrogance. The empire she had believed untouchable was slipping. Mistakes piled up, employees began questioning her decisions, and her father's trust in her wavered. The woman who had once been feared and untouchable now trembled in a house that no longer seemed stable. Meanwhile, Zainab received her first opportunity to truly shine. Mr. Kareem introduced her to a philanthropic organization that focused on empowering women from disadvantaged backgrounds. She was given responsibility for a new initiative, mentoring and supporting young women who had been victims of abuse, neglect, or poverty. Her first meeting was nerve-wracking. She faced women who had endured hardships that mirrored her own, and yet she stood before them with a quiet confidence, sharing her story, her survival, and her vision for a better life. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke, but they were tears of strength, not fear. She watched as these women were inspired by her courage, seeing in her a reflection of hope and resilience. "Your story is incredible," one young woman said after the session. "I never thought anyone could rise from what you went through." Zainab smiled softly. "You can," she replied. "You already have it in you. You just need someone to believe in you, and sometimes to remind yourself that strength is born in the darkest moments." Back at the Kingsley mansion, Vanessa's world continued to unravel. Financial mismanagement, poor decision-making, and a growing reputation for cruelty had begun to isolate her. Friends she once relied upon for flattery and validation now whispered behind her back, no longer intimidated by wealth alone. Her father's confidence in her decisions waned, and employees began openly questioning her authority. Vanessa's obsession with Zainab never faded. Every rumor of her success, every whisper about her growing influence, fueled a burning jealousy. She could not comprehend how a maid she had tormented had surpassed her in dignity, skill, and recognition. The world she had thought she controlled was slipping, and Zainab's rise was the proof. But Zainab did not dwell on revenge. She focused on her growth, on building a life filled with purpose, compassion, and influence. She used the lessons of cruelty and endurance not to hate, but to empathize and uplift. Every success was a quiet, powerful triumph over the suffering she had endured. One afternoon, as she stood on the balcony of her new office, looking out over the city that had once been a place of fear and struggle, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The girl who had been beaten down, starved, and mocked was now a woman who commanded respect. A woman whose voice mattered. A woman whose life was her own. And deep down, Vanessa was watching. She saw Zainab's success through whispers, through gossip, through the slowly spreading word of the woman who had transformed her pain into power. Vanessa's laughter no longer held the same weight. Her cruelty was powerless against someone who had endured and risen above it. Zainab had become unstoppable, not through vengeance, but through resilience, intelligence, and integrity. Every step she took was a declaration that suffering does not define a person, and that even the darkest past can give rise to the brightest future. The seeds of her rise, planted in tears, hunger, and bleeding hands, had finally blossomed. And while Vanessa clung to wealth and arrogance, Zainab was building something far more enduring. A life shaped by strength, purpose, and the knowledge that true power lies not in domination, but in survival and compassion. Zainab's life had shifted from survival to influence, and with each passing day, the woman she was becoming eclipsed the girl she had once been. She moved with quiet confidence, her scarred hands now tools of creation, leadership, and change. Every choice she made, every project she undertook, was a statement that she had endured cruelty and had emerged not only unbroken, but extraordinary. The philanthropic project she managed with Mr. Ibrahim Kareem grew rapidly. Young women from across the city came seeking mentorship, education, and refuge. They were drawn to Zainab not only because of her story, but because of the aura of hope and strength she radiated. Her experience, though painful, had made her a beacon for those trapped in cycles of abuse and poverty. During one of her first major speeches at a citywide conference, Zainab stood on the stage, her heart steady but her hands tingling with memories of trembling and hunger. The audience, a mix of dignitaries, social workers, and students, listened intently. She spoke of resilience, of dignity amidst adversity, and of the power that comes from enduring hardship. "I have known cruelty," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I have been mocked, starved, beaten, and silenced. But I have also learned something invaluable, that suffering is temporary when courage is constant, and dignity cannot be stolen by those who wish to see you broken. You too can rise above the hands that try to push you down." Applause erupted, and for the first time, Zainab allowed herself to truly feel the weight of admiration and respect she had longed for. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not of pain, but of relief, validation, and triumph. Back at the Kingsley mansion, Vanessa's world continued to crumble. Word of Zainab's prominence reached her through whispers of guests, employees, and her father's advisors. Each mention of Zainab's name cut deeper than any insult could. The arrogant daughter, once untouchable, felt powerless as the girl she had tormented soared into influence and respect. Vanessa's jealousy turned into desperation. She tried to assert her presence in public events, flaunt her wealth, and showcase her influence, but everything she did felt hollow. No accolades could mask the sting of witnessing Zainab, her former servant, commanding attention, admiration, and genuine respect. The mansion itself began to mirror Vanessa's unraveling. Staff whispered about inefficiency, delays in management, and the daughter's erratic behavior. Business associates questioned her decisions, noting the contrast between Vanessa's arrogance and Zainab's competence. Even her father, though still protective of her, could not ignore the growing disparity. Zainab, however, remained gracious. She did not gloat, nor did she seek revenge. Her rise was quiet yet undeniable, a testament to resilience over cruelty. She continued mentoring, building networks, and attending meetings where her intelligence and insight drew admiration. Every decision she made reflected a maturity born from surviving hardship. One evening, Vanessa confronted Zainab publicly at a social event, unable to hide the envy that had long simmered beneath her polished exterior. "So," Vanessa said, forcing a smile, "you've really become something, haven't you?" Zainab looked at her calmly, the calm of someone who had endured worse than arrogance. "I've learned that strength and dignity cannot be stolen, Vanessa," she said softly, yet each word carried weight. "And cruelty, no matter how powerful it seems, cannot outlast endurance." The statement hung in the air, charged with truth. Guests who overheard it exchanged looks, sensing the shift in power. Vanessa felt the sting of realization. The girl she had tried to destroy had become untouchable in ways wealth and status never could achieve. Zainab's life continued to flourish. She expanded her initiatives, provided scholarships, created safe spaces for vulnerable girls, and became a symbol of hope across the city. Her story inspired books, talks, and articles, all emphasizing the triumph of perseverance, resilience, and dignity over oppression. Meanwhile, Vanessa's arrogance had become a relic of the past. She was still wealthy, still living in the mansion that bore her name, but influence and respect had shifted. Where once fear dictated obedience, now admiration and capability determined the hierarchy of power, and Zainab had claimed her rightful place at the top. By the end of chapter 14, it was clear. The girl who had been beaten, starved, and humiliated had transformed completely. She had turned pain into power, cruelty into compassion, and endurance into triumph. Vanessa, once untouchable, had become a mere shadow in the light of Zainab's ascent. Zainab's rise was not just a personal victory, it was a message to the world. No one can crush a spirit that refuses to surrender, and the hands that were once broken can build empires far stronger than those founded on arrogance and cruelty. The city had come to know her name, Zainab Kareem. Once a timid, starving, humiliated maid, she had now become a symbol of resilience, courage, and dignity. The scars on her hands, though hidden beneath silk gloves or carefully applied creams, were more than physical. They were reminders of every insult, every hunger pang, every moment Vanessa had tried to break her spirit. But Zainab was unbroken. Her life had changed dramatically, yet she moved quietly, deliberately, carrying herself with a grace that demanded respect. Wealth had nothing to do with it. Power had nothing to do with it. What mattered was the strength that had been forged in the fires of suffering, and the lessons she had learned in the nights of prayer and tears. Zainab had begun mentoring young women who had endured their own versions of cruelty and neglect. She had created scholarships, safe houses, and mentorship programs, ensuring that no girl would have to suffer in silence as she had. Every life she touched became a testament to her journey, a journey that had begun in the dark, damp halls of the Kingsley mansion. One crisp morning, she arrived at a citywide event for women leaders. The hall buzzed with energy, and Zainab felt a twinge of nervousness, though she had long since mastered how to hide it. She adjusted her dress, straightened her posture, and stepped onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause. Her presence commanded attention, not because of her wealth, but because of her story, her poise, and the undeniable aura of strength she radiated. Cameras flashed, capturing the woman who had once been invisible and silenced. "Today," Zainab began, her voice strong and clear, "I stand not only as someone who survived cruelty, humiliation, and hunger, but as someone who refuses to be defined by it. I am here to remind every young girl listening that pain is temporary, endurance is powerful, and dignity is eternal." Tears glistened in the eyes of many in the audience. Her words carried weight, not because they were eloquent, but because they were real. Every phrase had been lived, not imagined. Meanwhile, in the distant halls of the Kingsley mansion, Vanessa sat in stunned silence as a news clip of Zainab's speech aired on television. Her perfect hair, designer dress, and wealth could not shield her from the reality. The girl she had tormented was thriving, succeeding, and inspiring thousands. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched. Every memory of cruelty she had inflicted, every scolding, every starvation, every laugh at Zainab's expense, returned to her mind with the sting of irony. Vanessa had believed power and fear could dominate Zainab forever. She had been wrong. Back at the event, Zainab continued. She told stories of girls she had mentored, of women she had helped rise from poverty, and of lives changed because someone had finally seen them as human beings. She spoke with passion, with empathy, and with the quiet authority of someone who had survived the worst the world could offer. After the event, she was approached by Mr. Kareem, who had supported her journey from the beginning. "I am so proud of you," he said quietly. "You have taken your suffering and transformed it into something extraordinary. You are a beacon for many, and no one, not even Vanessa, can diminish what you have built." Zainab smiled softly, thinking of the long nights she had spent praying in the dark, the cold and empty stomachs, the bleeding hands, and the moments she had felt completely alone. Those memories were still painful, but they were now the foundation of her strength. "Thank you," she replied. "I could not have done it without your guidance. And I want to help as many people as possible, so they never feel the way I once did." That evening, as Zainab walked through the city streets, she noticed people staring, not because of her appearance, but because of her presence. People whispered her name, admired her courage, and sought her advice. She had become untouchable, not because of wealth or arrogance, but because of integrity, resilience, and compassion. Vanessa's world, in contrast, was collapsing. The mansion, once a symbol of dominance, now seemed hollow. Employees began leaving. Her father had begun shifting responsibilities to professionals who respected skill and character, not fear and wealth. Invitations to social events waned. The world that had once feared her had begun to notice her flaws, and with them, the absence of true strength. Vanessa tried to assert control, but every attempt was met with quiet opposition or outright failure. She had spent years tearing others down, only to find that the person she had destroyed most of all was herself. Her own capacity for empathy, respect, and genuine influence had withered under arrogance and cruelty. Meanwhile, Zainab received an invitation to speak at an international conference. The event celebrated women who had overcome adversity, and Zainab's story was at the forefront. She would travel, inspire, and share her message with the world. From the girl who had cleaned floors with bleeding hands to the woman addressing global leaders, her journey was a testament to endurance and triumph. One night, Zainab sat in her modest yet comfortable apartment, looking at the city lights. She thought of Vanessa, of the mansion, of the cruelty that had once defined her life. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel not just survival, but complete victory. "Everything I endured," she whispered, "was worth this moment. Every tear, every pain, every hunger, every insult. It brought me here. And no one can ever take this from me." It was the culmination of years of suffering, prayer, and endurance. She had risen above cruelty, beyond wealth, and into a life defined by purpose, compassion, and undeniable strength. In that quiet, glowing room, Zainab knew the truth that Vanessa had never understood. True power is not built on fear, but on resilience, courage, and the will to rise when the world tries to break you. And as she closed her eyes that night, a smile of profound peace touched her lips. She was free, she was triumphant. And she had finally claimed the life that had always been hers to take.